Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron. Welcome back to the podcast, episode number 2 of the podcast. We did episode 1 last week and I promised you that there would be guests. It wouldn't just be me sat here talking to myself for an hour every week. We would be bringing people on to discuss the Toffees. Today's guest, a long-term friend of mine. If you've watched the channel for a number of years, you will have seen Corney's face every now and then pop up to talk about the Blues. Delighted to have you back on again, mate. Firstly, before we get into any Everton talk, because I know that the majority of the Everton talk is probably going to be on the negative side, shall we say. It certainly isn't exciting at the moment. But before we get into any of that, how are you? How's things? How are you doing?
Well, what you're saying? There's no positive news that we can talk about Everton. We're outside the relegation zone. That's a positive.
Well, yeah,
no,
I suppose so. 3, 4 weeks ago, we'd have probably taken that, wouldn't we?
no, it's going all right. I was just mentioning to you the weather is just shite. Where I am here in Amsterdam. But other than that, it's going well, going good. Going on a skiing trip next Thursday, so I'm quite
Oh,
excited.
very. Be careful. Be careful. I know that it can get.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of
I
people
called
talk
my
about.
called my insurance today to just make sure that I'm covered. Otherwise,
Yeah.
because it's my first time, I've never skied, so it's quite a new thing for me. So, but other than that, yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, mate, I'm I'm all good, as we said, other than Everton being absolutely terrible at pretty much everything we try and do. Other than that, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. Trying to separate the absolute pain of Everton from general real life and things that actually matter. But yeah, let's get straight into it then. We may as well start with the weekend's game. Obviously, I haven't spoken about it yet. I did a little instant sort of reaction on TikTok and YouTube if you've seen that. Just a little 4 or 5 minute thing because I had a few things to say after the match. But like I said in those videos, we were going to dissect it a little bit more in today's episode and talk about it in greater depth. Just before I go to you, mate, for me, I just felt like it was another game that I'd watched numerous times before. It felt like I'd watched the same movie time and time again. And I said that on the instant match reaction. I said it felt like on Saturday morning I'd woken up and I'd put in a DVD on of the film that I'd watched the previous night, and that was the same film that I'd watched 2 weeks ago and the same film that I'd watched 3 weeks ago. It just very much felt like, again, I'm not going to come on here and say the players aren't giving everything or they're not trying or they're not working hard, but it just seems the same thing every week. We come out, we huff and puff a little bit, we have a little bit of the ball, we're in control of possession, we don't take our chances, we don't create massive chances. I've seen a few people on social media during the game talking about how dominant we were in the first 45 minutes. I just didn't see that personally myself. Okay, we had more of the ball than Manchester United did, and we maybe looked like the more attacking side, but we never really put Man United under any proper pressure. We had a couple of half chances. We didn't have any big opportunities that you look at and you go, oh my God, that's a clear, he should be scoring that one. We had a couple of chances we should have done better with probably, but nothing that you look back on and think, wow, that was a golden opportunity. How have we missed that? And then we were made to pay through our own defensive errors. I mean, we give away 2 penalties on the day, probably lucky to not give away 3 if Marcus Rashford is, a couple of inches further back and he's onside, then Jared Branthwaite gives one away towards the end of the game. And if Mikalenko's a little bit more unlucky on another day at Old Trafford, he gives away 2 as well for the handballs. So it wasn't by any sense of the imagination the worst performance we've ever seen, in the sense of that Everton turned up and got absolutely battered and the floor wiped with us. But it wasn't a particular good performance, was it? It wasn't ever one that we looked like we were going to particularly go out and win. And a lot of people were talking about how poor Manchester United were. And for me, I just felt like that was a little bit indicative of Everton. They didn't really need to get out of second gear to beat us. They beat us comfortably 2-0 whilst being not particularly great, and that's a little bit of a worry for me. What did you think about the game?
Yeah, so I was watching. One of my best mates this side is an Arsenal fan, and I went to watch at his house, and yeah, I just sat there with. Normally, I get so angry watching us, and I just kind of like in my back of my head, I'm like, are we really gonna beat Man United in at Old Trafford when we haven't done it with better teams? Even though they're not great, but it's just a case of like, yeah, it's difficult to kind of comprehend the game itself. Like you said, wasn't bad. In the midfield, we probably, if the game was won or lost in the midfield, we probably won most of the battles there. But then the actual chances created is so meticulous. Oh, not that's not the right words. Like it's the same type of chances. It's not like we're playing balls in
Yeah,
behind. We're having one-on-ones. It's like let's play the robotic football,
yeah,
play it out, play it to the sides. But where we used to have Lucas Dean doing that with proper balls into the box, now we have Dwight McNeil, which runs down blind alleys in on the wing, and both our players are so left foot dominated. So like I feel like it's so repetitive, and I think how many of our shots were actually on top, were actually blocked by the keeper. I think 25 of the shots were just hitting the Man United players. So it was it was quite shy, to be honest, and we can't really have any issues with those penalties because it's the most probably um, uh, normally you'd say it's like, oh, it's going to get given, but I think it was pretty clear that those were
yeah,
definitely penalties, so
yeah.
you can't really argue against that.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. I agree completely. And I think one of Sean Dyche's biggest sort of compliments this season from not only the fans that are particularly invested in his management style, but certainly the majority of Evertonians, I think the biggest compliment is that he's improved us generally defensively. I mean, our clean sheets record is there for itself. Jordan Pickford is up there with some of the top goalkeepers in the league for clean sheets. And generally defensively, in moments this season, we've been able to put good performances in. Jared Brandtwaite has obviously come into the team and exploded onto the scene, as a lot of us expected him to, because of his quite clear talent. You know, James Tarkowski's created a good, strong partnership there. But what the problem is with that is it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, we are relying on our defence to be absolutely 10 out of 10 week in, week out, because if they're not 10 out of 10, then we almost certainly aren't going to win that game of football. And there's absolutely no getting away from it. You're spot on, mate. The two penalties that were given, I thought, I actually tweeted during the game that they were soft, but I didn't mean soft as in they were soft. It was soft contact and it shouldn't have been given. I meant soft as in it was stupid. It was idiotic by both Tarkowski and Godfrey to throw themselves in those areas, in those positions, especially someone like Tarkowski. I mean, you just show him the outside and show him the line, and he's only really got one option from there, is to put a cross in, with
so
his
like
left foot.
why would he even go, like just put in a foot?
Yeah,
It's
it's silly. It's
you'd expect that from Michael Keane, but
yeah.
not Tarkowski.
Exactly. We've grown over the last sort of, well, 3/4 of a season now to, or even longer, because he was pretty consistent last season. Over the last year or so, we've grown to not expect that from him. So when it comes from him, it's almost a surprise. But like you've just said there, it really frustrates me that Everton can go to a ground like Old Trafford against the Manchester United team that aren't particularly great and aren't, haven't particularly got a good run of form under their belt, and their managers under a little bit of pressure, and their players aren't particularly, they're not the Manchester United they used to be, put it that way. When I was growing up and Everton went to Old Trafford, I had absolutely no hope we were going to come away from anything, and Everton were a much better team back then than we were now, bearing in mind. But that was because Manchester United, obviously, were the best team in the country, and at times the world by some stretch.
They
Whereas
also have
now,
Howard Webb.
yeah, they also had their referee in the majority of the referees, by the way, not just Howard Webb, but he was the ringleader. Whereas now you look at it and you sort of think they're a team that, you can get at. There's a team there that you can beat. You can cause issues. You can put them under pressure, and we just didn't seem to do that, and we never seem to do that either when we go to Old Trafford. Man United have been very, very sort of touchy for a fair few years now. They've not been what they once were, and we always seem to go there, and they always win comfortably. Now, whether that, and by comfortably, I know some people will say we had 20 odd shots at goal, and we had loads of possession in the first half. It doesn't matter. I had people telling me we dominated the first half. No, when you dominate a half of football, you go in 2 or 3-0 up at half time, or you go in having had 5, 6, 7, 8 massive chances. You've hit the bar, you've hit the post, you've had a couple. You've forced the keeper into making 2 or 3 brilliant saves. Onana never made one great save on Saturday. Not one. He made a couple of saves you'd expect him to make. He made a couple that, as I said, maybe he'd be under pressure early on in the season because he was making mistakes. But now he's settled. He didn't have an issue saving anything we put at him on Saturday. And for me, that means that he was never really under any massive pressure. So we didn't dominate. We just had a lot of the ball. And like typically when we have a lot of the ball, we don't know what to do with it. Like you've just said, every chance seems to be the same chance. A long ball over in the hope that one of the 2 wingers can miraculously turn into world-class footballers, which they aren't, or Dominic Calvert-Lewin is going to miraculously be able to take 4 or 5 players on. And it just isn't working at the moment. And something that is massively frustrating me about Everton at the minute is that there seems to be this divide in the fan base at the moment, and it's bred from who is to blame for what's going on. Now, we all know as Evertonians that the bigger issues, the wider picture, the bigger situation is obviously through the fault of the owner, Mashiri, the board members, the previous board members. We all know that. But at the end of the day, we've been having the Mashiri, Ken Wright, Barrett Baxendale 777 conversation for a long, long time. And we should continue to have that because it's the future of our football club. But that doesn't change what goes on the pitch. And it certainly doesn't affect what goes on the pitch week in, week out. Or it shouldn't do anyway. The only thing that should affect what's going on the pitch is the manager's instructions and his coaching techniques and the players that are playing. And there seems to be this thing at the moment amongst fan bases of it's not Dyche's fault, it's the players' fault. The players are absolutely terrible. He can't do what the manager's telling them to do. Or the flip reverse of it is it's the manager's fault. He's not coaching them. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. He's not doing the other. I actually think that there needs to be a bit more maturity amongst the fan base here. Whether we believe it's the manager's fault or the players' fault, I might sit here and say I think it's more the manager. You could sit here and say it's more the players. The reality is it isn't working at the moment. So whoever is at fault, and I personally think it's both. I think the manager's to blame in this situation, and I think the players are to blame. But whoever's to blame, it's not working, and something needs to change. And as I said,
what would you change? What would you? Because I understand what you're saying, the manager always has to take some blame. Because would we have taken Sean Dyche as our manager 4 years ago? Probably not.
Yeah.
But he is here now. And this narrative that Everton has been struggling for years is bullshit. It's kind of been 2.5 years, and all these new managers are just Rafa Benitez just got sacked, which shows the level he's been at. Frank Lampard shouldn't get a Premier League or Championship job again. So slowly our managers have been getting worse with worse squads because we've had to sell, and we've gotten worse and worse managers. So now we literally blew Burnley, and I think Burnley had some sort of steel in them, more than our play. I think our players are just so depleted from like ideas, and we've now literally become a team fighting relegation. Whereas in the past we might have fallen in relegation and then gotten a new manager, and our players would bring us back up. But because we've had to sell all our creativity, and Andre Gomez is still on the. Andre Gomez was playing on the bench in a team when we had good players. Yeah. Now we're waiting on him to come back and score our free kick. He's the only guy that can apparently take a free kick at this club, because we can't. No one has a creativity to, besides Dwight McNeil and James Garner, who gives long ball free kicks, but we don't have anyone. So I'm going on a rant here, but I'm just trying to give you an idea. it's just going backwards with worse players and worse managers. And now, it's like and we're in a stage where we we're so fucked, but we doesn't matter. I obviously you can't say it doesn't matter who we bring in, but I don't know if no one can. These players aren't great. They are not great,
No, I
and
agree. I agree,
yeah,
and I think you made a really, really good point there. Over the course of the period of time that Everton have been in a struggling position, fighting relegation, etc., etc., our squads have gotten worse. And don't get me wrong, I do think Sean Dyche is a better manager than Frank
yeah.
Lampard.
I
But
also think so. I'm
yeah,
not
no,
trying to.
no,
Yeah,
yeah, 100%. But you are right that we're getting weaker by the year because we're having to every time we have a top player. So for example, the first season we stayed up, Richarlison, scored 10 goals, something like that, and was a huge part of keeping us in the Premier League. We then sell him because we have to sell him. Last season we come into it, the start of the season, Anthony Gordon looks bright, he's sharp, he's getting involved, he's scoring goals, he's sort of got that attitude that we needed of a player to pick the ball up and run with it and drag us through games. He
but
then
we
gets
saw
sold.
Lucas Dean and
Luca
Richarlison
Dean,
in the
yeah.
same in the same season,
Yeah,
and just before that season started, Sigurdsson was fucking a okay, I'm joking. He was doing some other things. He got released, and Rodriguez was so that was our four most important players,
yeah,
and then they
absolutely.
all left in the space of 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely, and
Yeah,
and there is no, and I do, there is an element of me that does feel slightly sorry for Sean Dyche because I agree with everyone when they say look at what he's got to work with. I absolutely agree. I think the playing squad is threadbare. I think there's one or two players with genuine, real quality that have got the opportunity to become more than what they are now, and I don't think it's difficult to point those out. But I think
Onana
the
and
rest.
Brentford.
Exactly, and I think the rest of the squad, bar and Jordan Pickford, who I genuinely
Yeah,
think is quality,
he's
but
also good.
he's
And just
spending his formative years at the club now. So I don't think he's particularly in that same category because Onana and Branthwaite are much younger. But the rest of the squad is filled with
average.
hard-working players that are bang average and that will, can only give as much as they can give. So I do feel slightly sorry for the manager, and I understand. I understand the manager is trying to play this game of right. Well, if we have this much of the ball and we put it up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin this much, and we have this many shots at goal, then we're bound to score at some point, and that's fine. I get it. I get he's trying to play the percentages. I get when we lost to Luton and Fulham and Wolves at the start of the season, we were all told, look at the XG, look at the XG, look at the XG. And then we had a period in December where we won 4 games on the spin, and all of the those fans that were backing Sean Dyche at the beginning of the season were saying, look, it's coming to fruition. We're starting to win games. We're starting to build confidence. I get it. Absolutely fine. Again, I don't think it's 100% on the manager. I 100% believe that the manager and the players are culpable for where Everton are at the moment. And the reason I think the manager is because even though I understand that the game plan is very similar, sort of week in, week out, in the sense of that, I think the overall approach is to be strong defensively, and then when we get on the sort of attack, to try and feed it into Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison and hope that they can produce something with Decore and Dominic Calvert-Lewin or Beto, whoever it might be, floating in the middle. But we have to look at the facts and the results, and the reality of the situation is, regardless of whether you love Sean Dyche, you think he's the greatest manager Everton have ever had, or you think he's not good enough for this football club, we have not won a game of football in the Premier League since mid-December. Now, 11 games without a win is an absolute disgrace for Everton Football Club. Regardless of what we know Everton as now, I've grew up with Everton Football Club only ever really being a success in the sense of that we'd fight for Europe, we'd get in Europe, we might get to the quarters or the semis, the odd final. I haven't grown up with Everton Football Club as a champion of England or champion of Europe or winning FA Cups year in, year out. But I still know that 11 games without a win is not good enough. And I know that because when Frank Lampard had a similar run, pretty much the entire fan base wanted them out. When Rafa Benitez had a similar run, pretty much the entire fan base wanted them out. And I'm not saying that sacking Sean Dyche would be the right thing because, A, really, Have we got the money to do that at this current moment, given we'd then have to go and pay for another manager, as we spoke about a little bit off camera? Is there anyone really at the club whose responsibility it is to make that decision with the whole takeover stuff looming? But what I do definitely think he needs to do is make some changes, because I hear the same thing every week from people on social media. What you expect him to do? He's only got a certain squad he can work with. He's only got, if Dominic Calvert-Lewin misses one from 5 yards, what do you expect him to do? If Tarkowski gives a penalty away, what do you expect him to do? I get that. I understand that. One thing I will say is that excuse wasn't used for any of the other managers. It was never, it's not Lampard's fault we're giving away penalties, or it's not Lampard's fault we're not scoring goals. Anyway, I digress. What I want him to do is change something, because all I've seen for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks is the same team, with the exception of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto swapping out. The same midfield, the same back line pretty much. Firstly, why, and I'll never understand this for the life of me, why we've got 2 right backs sitting on the bench and an out of form centre back playing right back is beyond me. I mean, Ben Godfrey has been all right, generally speaking, of late, but anybody with a footballing brain could
Doesn't
tell you
look
that
like a great footballer.
he's and that's because he isn't. And we all know, by the way, that Ben Godfrey, I think, is the
There's some
epitome.
praise, but what else
He's the
does he?
epitome of what Everton have been for years, and Everton's recruitment for years. He's athletic, he looks the part, he looks like he'd be an absolutely fantastic footballer, and much like Mason Holgate and much like Michael Keane, he is capable of coming into the team once every blue moon and putting in an alright performance. I've seen Michael Keane come in and look excellent. I've seen Ben Godfrey come in and look excellent. I've even seen Mason Holgate, okay, it was years ago, but I've even seen Mason Holgate come in and do
2020.
a stellar job. Yeah, but what all those 3 players have always had in common is they have no consistency. They're not able to do it over a 5-6 month period. We just talked about James Tarkowski. James Tarkowski made a mistake on Saturday. Absolutely. It was a silly tackle. He should never have made it. He doesn't make many of them. He doesn't make many of them poor tackles. He doesn't make many of them poor decisions. Jared Brandwaite, 20 odd years old, come in this season. Okay, he's had 1 or 2 moments. The Haaland moment was a little bit, wasn't great, and a couple of other mistakes. But other than that, generally, for 3/4 of a season, he's been absolutely phenomenal for Everton. Those players, Godfrey, Holgate, Keane, we've had loads of them in the past, capable of coming in and doing a job one week and then the next week being absolutely horrific. And we all knew that the Ben Godfrey train was going to come to an end at some point. Why is the club captain, the one player who could arguably drag these players through a game, as he's done numerous times before, by the way, over the last couple of seasons, where he's dragged players, over the line to win a game of football?
How does
Why
he
is
still
he sat
have
on the
how does he
bench?
still have hair left on his
I
head?
don't know.
Because I
I
don't
don't
know
know. And
how he breathes Everton, but
he does.
he's fighting a losing battle, it seems, because
But that's where it does become on the manager. I appreciate, I'm not saying I expect Sean Dyche to turn Dominic Calvert-Lewin into a world-class striker overnight. I'm not saying that when Dom misses a big chance or Beto misses a penalty, that's all on the manager. The manager's terrible. I'm not saying that. But when you've got a right back who's been at the club for 15 years now, knows the club in and out, demands the very best from every single one of those players, and is also probably our best fullback at the club technically still, which says everything you need to know, but is the truth. Why is he sat on the bench as well as a young up-and-coming right back? Now, okay, Nathan Patterson isn't everybody's cup of tea, and I understand that, and I'm not by any sense of the imagination saying he's amazing, but he's a natural right back. At least he naturally plays in that position. Why are them 2 sat on the bench and an out-of-position centre-back who 2 months ago, by the way, was on the list to be sold, and we all thought would never kick a ball for Everton again? Why is he playing ahead of them 2? That is on the manager. Not changing the formation in 3 months when we've not won a game of football since December is on the manager. I get it. Not everyone likes a 5 at the back formation, or not everyone likes change, but this isn't working. It only works playing this type of football if you're winning games, and we've not won a game of football in 3 months, and we can't afford to say, right, well, we'll just continue doing this because one day we'll win. There's not an awful lot of games left, and we've got a lot of very winnable games coming up at home. We can't afford to go in with this blasé approach of, oh yeah, we'll just play like we did last week and maybe we'll have a bit better luck this time. Maybe we'll win this game. For me, there needs to be a complete switch up now. And I'm not saying sack the manager because A, it's not going to happen, and B, I'm not too sure that'd be the right thing anyway. But what definitely needs to happen for me is he needs to make some changes in this team, whether it be personnel, whether it be formation changes, whether it be tactical changes. Something needs to be adapted because this isn't currently working. And I think the players look demotivated. And you can see on the players' faces, it's like, how many times are we going to try this? How many times are we going to try that? Saturday, they looked terrified to shoot. Dwight McNeil had the ball on the edge of the box and he took about four touches instead of getting a shot away. And it's like, there's got to
But
be
he
something.
also shoots hopeless. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, he's not having a great season because he was taking people on last season. Now he's scared. Whenever
Yeah.
he gets there, he turns around and he passes it backwards, or he has a hopeful shot from 4 meters outside the box and it just hits one of the other players. It just looks a bit dull.
Yeah.
Like him and Jack Harrison are similar type of players for me. What would you change? Would you do 4-4-2 and you have Dobbin, someone on the and you have Calvert-Lewin and Beto playing as two, and you have in the middle James Garner and Onana.
I'm
What
not.
I would do, and then I would have Dobbin trying out for some pace on the side with maybe McNeil or Harrison on the other side.
Well, we'll go into changes in a little bit later on after we finish the United segment, because I do want to talk about that changes of formation and changes of personnel. No, mate, because you brought up a really good point there, because you brought up Lewis Dobbin. Another thing I noticed on Saturday is Yusuf Chimiti coming on for 3 minutes at the end of a game. With all the responsibility in the world to go on and change it. Also, Ashley Young coming on with a few minutes left. I mean, I'm not sure what that was for. Was that so that he could get a standing ovation from the Man United fans? I'm not quite sure. I'm not even taking the mickey, mate. Generally, tactically, I don't know what the point was to bring Ashley Young on, other than for him to get a nice moment for himself, which isn't really appropriate when we've not won a game in 3 months and we're 2-0 down. Anyway, let's just say the manager does stick with his formation and says, no, this is it. This is the way I want to play. This is what I'm doing. This is what I think will work. At what point does he start to introduce a Lewis Dobbin or a Yusuf Chimiti? Because for as much as people can sit there and say they're not ready, they're not good enough, they're not sure. And I read a little headline a couple of days ago. Don't know if you've seen this, mate. It was going around on Twitter from Paul Joyce, I think it was, of apparently Sean Dyche saying something like Everton's academy there's nobody in Everton's academy that's ready to step up. They're not at the level, etc., etc.
Was that a real quote? Was that?
Yeah, it was.
Everton TV, or where did he say that?
I'll read it out now. It was from Paul Joyce, who is I think he works for the Telegraph and quite a respectable journalist. He wouldn't have put it out if it wasn't.
I saw it, but I don't know if it was.
So he said,
real.
Sean Dyche has admitted the production line at Everton's academy has run dry and there is no array of young talent ready to be pitched to the Premier League. Now, fine, okay, I don't see these young lads week in, week out. I can't sit here and say that's a lie. There's 4 or 5 of them that are unbelievable, because they mightn't be. But what I do know is, at this current moment, Jack Harrison, Dwight McNeil, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto are not doing what we need them to do. They're not turning up, and if you ask me, it doesn't look like they've got an array of talent ready to be pitched to the Premier League, any of them. Now, obviously, they have, and they're just going through bad moments, etc., whatever. But I do think it comes a point where the manager needs to be a little bit braver, and he needs to just say, do you know what, Jack, you've not really been great for the last 3 or 4 months now. Now, yes, okay, you do the defensive work and you put yourself about and you work hard. That's great. I'll work hard, Sean. If you're watching, phone me. I'll turn up. I'll run around. I'll work hard.
Is such a thing thrown around. Is that what we fall into? He works hard.
Exactly. That should be the minimum standard. The point is he's not doing enough, Jack Harrison. And to be fair to Jack, neither's Dwight McNeil. Dwight McNeil's not doing enough either. It's not just Jack Harrison. Dom's not doing enough up front, and neither is Beto. At what point do you look at that £15 million striker you bought in the summer and think, all right, you're raw, you're young, you're maybe not ideally ready for the Premier League now, but we haven't really got much other option? At what point do you look at young Lewis Dobbin and think, all right, you're not great and you mightn't be completely ready yet, but you're something different. The opposition team won't know what to expect, and you will at least have the fearlessness to pick the ball up and run at players. And sometimes he might get a slice of luck. I was talking last week about Everton, and a couple of people in the comments were saying that's another thing about Everton is we don't have any luck. You know, other teams get lucky at times. We never seem to get lucky. I agree with that, and I do think an element of that is just because we're Evertonians, and I don't think we're destined for any sort of success. But I also think it's because you make your own luck. We're not going to get
Yeah.
any luck if our players, our wingers, are picking the ball up in good areas and turning back and passing it back. We're not going to get any luck if we're just lumping the ball up to Dom, expecting him to, become Maradona for half an hour. We're not going to get any luck. Maybe you'll get a bit of luck if Lewis Dobbin picks the ball up on the wings, drives towards a player, and the defender gets caught in his feet, and Dobbin can go beyond him and then create a chance. Maybe that's when we'll get a bit of luck, when we try and be a bit braver, when we try and be a bit more ruthless. It just seems at the moment like
We
we
can't always play the victim. Like we
yeah,
can play.
exactly.
I mean, we were kind of victimized with the whole FFP, which is an absolute shambles. But like yeah, at some point we have to start kind of standing up as a club and demand from within like better standards. Like at what point do we have a Connor Bradley that comes up and I know, like they always seem to get Liverpool always seem to get these kids that are I don't know where
Yeah,
they get them, but they come on. I guess the environment's better for them to probably thrive than it is for our youngsters to come through and be spoken about. But yeah, it would be nice for us to just kind of take it on ourselves and just start building something like with the youngsters. It's worth giving them a go at least to see. Doesn't help. What's a guy gonna do for 5 minutes in injury time um, when he's like you need to give him a run of games to properly assess. I think how good or bad he is. So
exactly,
I would
exactly.
definitely give a Chimity or Dobbin a go.
Exactly. And do you know, if we were winning every week, I'd understand it. I'd understand people saying, oh, they're not good enough, they're not ready. I'd get it. And I'm not sitting here saying, by the way, start Chimity every week now for the rest of the season or get bench Calvert-Lewin and Beto. But what I'm saying is, if we are 1-0 down or 2-0 down and Beto isn't particularly performing, Dom hasn't really been performing, then why not put Chimity on for half an hour at the end of a game? Why not give him 45 minutes? Why not give him a real opportunity to go and have an impact on the game? Not 2 or 3 minutes at the end of it so we could say, well, look, I brought him on. Well, you're bringing of course he's not going to be ready for the Premier League if you're bringing him on with 2 minutes to go, expecting him to change the game. Nobody's going to be ready for that. Give him, you know
30,
what,
30 minutes at least.
at half time on Saturday, when we are 2-0 down or a goal down, and we're looking at it and we're thinking nothing's really happening here. Beto was putting himself about but not doing anything of any note. McNeil wasn't really doing much. Harrison wasn't really doing much. Why not put one of them on then? Why not put Dobbin on at half time? What's the worst that can happen? Nobody. And I'm fairly confident in saying this. If Sean Dyche would have put Lewis Dobbin on at half time, against Manchester United last week, and Everton would have then gone on to lose the game, and Lewis Dobbin would have gone on to not really do much in it or just sort of coast out of it. Not one of us, not one Evertonian is coming on and blaming him for that substitution, because at least he's trying something different. And I am not, contrary to belief of what people might think, I am not a Sean Dyche outer. I am not a huge I'm not as big of a Sean Dyche fan as some people are, but I'm definitely not somebody who's in a position to say, "Oh, get him out, he's this, he's that, he's the other." But he makes it really, really difficult for me to defend him when he's doing the same thing week in, week out, and we're getting the same results week in, week out. So people can sit there and tell me, "Oh, but we're having 20-odd shots on target." As you quite rightly said before, mate, give me one of those shots that were even any form of trouble for the goalkeeper. There wasn't. I can't remember one. Onana had an overhead kick which looped into his hands. James Garner had one which was saved, and then Onana blasted the rebound over the bar. And and even the James Garner shot was saved fairly comfortably. It was right at him. It's not like we hit the bar, we hit the post. We had their goalkeeper had a whaley of a match. And I get it. We've had matches this season. I think. last week's game, not Manchester United the week before. Who did we play the week before? It's all rolls into one. West Ham. West Ham, I think it was Areola, their goalkeeper. He had a fantastic performance, and I think there's been 2 or 3 times this season, I think Leno's done it as well, where Everton have come up against goalkeepers and the goalkeepers have put in their best performance of their career on that day. I get it, understandable. But like you've just said, we can't keep just blaming ulterior things. Their keeper had a great game that day, that's why we didn't win. Oh, our strikers can't finish this day, that's why we didn't win. No, it doesn't matter what the reasoning is. We're not winning and something needs to change. And I watch this Everton team week in, week out, and don't get me wrong, I thought we had chances against West Ham, and I thought we should have put more of those chances away. But I can't remember many other times over the last few months where I've sat and I've thought, oh my God, we absolutely battered them today. We battered them. We had chance after chance after chance after chance. I just, post-Christmas, can't really remember a game where that has been the case. And the one time it was the case, we ended up losing 3-1. Because we couldn't take our chances. So, yeah, for me, I think that just the big thing to take out of this is it felt very similar to everything else we've watched of late, didn't it, mate? And something's got to change because it's not working at the moment.
No, I 100% agree. But I was watching Toffee TV and Pate was saying that we need to demand higher standards at the club, and that's definitely correct. But then, I don't know at what cost. So what does he mean? Well, we need to sack a manager, or does it? Because if we just sack managers, we just become Watford.
Yeah.
But then, like, I
By the
don't
way,
know.
we are fully on the way to becoming Watford anyway, to be fair. We're on that train.
They sack one every 6 months. We sack one every year. So
Yeah, so
we
we're
have a
getting
way
it.
to
And
go.
it used to be every 18 months, so we're getting it down. We are getting it down. I think for in Ped's defense, I think what Ped means is
No. I'll back him.
yeah.
I'm just. I wonder. How do we do it with the fuck show that's currently
Well,
going on?
I've realised this recently, and it's part of the reason I brought up the sort of dive, the sort of um two sides of seemingly Evertonians at the moment. The one side is very Sean Dyche pro, and it's not Sean Dyche's fault, it's the players' fault. And the other side is the other way round almost. It is Sean Dyche's fault. He's not training the players properly. That's why, what I said before, I think we just all need to come together and go, no. Firstly, whether you absolutely despise Sean Dyche and want him sacked and don't think he's good enough, or whether you absolutely love him and think he's great, he ain't getting sacked. Let's be honest, he ain't getting sacked. There's
You
nobody there
mean
to sack.
this season,
I mean
or
now. I mean right now. I
no?
don't
Yeah,
mean
no.
ever.
You'll see out the season,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. He's not getting sacked right now. He isn't. And on the other hand as well, these players are going to be here until at least the end of the season, and no new players are going to come in until this season is over, at the very least. That's even if we can make deals in the summer. So we have got what we've got. We've got a manager that's going to be here until the end of May. We've got a group of players that are going to be here until the end of May. So instead of arguing amongst ourselves and it being like, it's his fault, no it's not, it's his fault, no it's not, it's their fault, he's not good enough, how about we just all come together and try and figure out a way to change this and a way to improve things? Because I think the sensible way of looking at it is, yes, the players aren't great and understandable. Sean Dyche is being given an extremely difficult hand. The squad is as weak as it's been for a long time at the moment, and we've got very few standout players, like we said, and those standout players we do have, your Onanas and your Brantwaits, they're not in positions on the pitch that are they are in centre back is a huge position, and so centre midfield. But my point is it's not like we've got a standout striker who's scoring 30 goals and getting us out of games. Brantwaite has been excellent this season, absolutely fantastic, and defensively he's got us out of games numerous times. But he's not putting the ball in the other end because he's not a striker, and neither's Amadou Onana because he's not a striker. And our strikers at the moment and our players in those forward positions aren't doing enough. So we need to come together to find a way to make this work, because if we don't, then we are staring down a battle of relegation. We know there's a potential, another points deduction on the way, and Forest likely to get one as well. So we don't know where we're going to be after that. But one thing's for sure is no win in 11 games is not good enough for Everton Football Club, and that needs to change. It didn't look like it was going to change from the opening 5 minutes on Saturday. I didn't watch that game after 5 minutes and think we're going to win this. I just didn't, because firstly, as soon as we conceded the goal, you pretty much know straight away that that's game over. Secondly, as you said, mate, every attack we might have attacked, we might have had a few shots on goal, but it was never with any purpose. It was never with any intensity or we never really. I don't think Manchester United once in that game seemed worried or particularly on edge. We had a couple of moments, but they dealt with it fairly quickly, and that was it. We moved on. So we've got 3 weeks now. We've got 3 weeks, obviously, before we play again, which is unbelievable, by the way. Absolutely unbelievable. I'm made up, mate. I've never been so happy. I was sitting there before thinking, oh my God, this weekend, what can I do? I don't have to watch Everton. I don't have to
But
worry.
we have Luton that we have to watch.
We've got to worry about every other team instead, which is great, but that is less stressful than having to watch Everton. I think, well, maybe it isn't to some people. I don't know, but personally, for me, I'm going to switch off from football this weekend and just check the scores and not particularly pay a lot of attention to it, because it stresses me out enough when Everton play. But in your opinion, we spoke briefly before about changes and formation changes and stuff like that. What they've gone away to Portugal now. The manager's taking them away to Portugal, warm weather training, which is good. That's positive. That'll help fitness and certain other things. But it won't turn Dominic Calvert-Lewin into a 20-goal a season striker. It won't turn Beto into a 20. It won't turn Dwight McNeil into an unbelievable winger. In your opinion, in these 3 weeks, what does the manager need to do? What does he need to focus on to make sure we come back a different team?
No, that's an interesting one. I think I don't know what he does week in week out, but I think getting together, um, obviously practicing a lot of target shooting, but in game situations. But I think it's also good if the team come together and try and probably have proper team building, try and understand each other. Yeah, obviously talent. It's not going to change the talent, but I just think, yeah, for the next 10 games, there has to be a togetherness from the team as well as the club. And I'm sure they might have been already, but something obviously has to change. I would five at the back doesn't work for me, so I would stick to 4-4-2. Beto, Calvert Lewin feeding off each other. If we can have Dele Alli, I don't know how far he's away, and I'm pretty sure he won't come in and be amazing. But having him as an option, as like a false nine, not false nine, like a you used to play with Harry Kane.
Yeah.
If we say again,
So I was just behind Harry Kane. That's what I was going to say. Just behind.
Obviously, yeah, we don't know what his situation is. He still has a few games left for us to play before we have to pay. Depending on, I guess, how far he is. If he'll play a few games, that would be an option. But yeah, it's probably wishful thinking. And then having some pace, so that we sit in, and having some pace to counter properly, because at the moment our counters start off good and then we realize there's no pace. So the guy, Dwight McGill, runs forward and then he turns around and just passes the ball back because there's nothing to feed. Or so I think some pace on the wings, and then going for like a Dobbin. It would be nice to probably have Damari Gray on the other side. On the other side, at least he has pace. But then you have Onana or Ghana or Idrissa Guy and Onana in the middle, and you have Seamus Coleman back at right back, and yeah, so I would go 4-4-2.
I think that's a really important point, is that we all know the manager's only got what he's got. We know we can't go out there, and like you mentioned, it'd be nice to have somebody with a bit more pace in Damari Gray. It would have been nice to have somebody with a fearlessness of Anthony Gordon. We haven't got those players now. We've got what we've got, and I agree 100%. I think the manager needs to bring Lewis Dobbin in a little bit more, especially in those moments when we've got half an hour to go and Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison have both been fairly anonymous in games. There's no reason to keep them on for another 20-25 minutes, especially when you've got a young lad there with a lot to prove and will have a lot of fearlessness. I think the two up front is huge, absolutely huge, because people will have different views of what they want to see Everton do and where they want to see it, how they want to see Everton line up. Five at the back, some would say, have to use the wingers as use the fullbacks as the wingers
Our
almost.
fullbacks are not very. We don't really have fullbacks anymore.
I completely agree. By the way, I don't think our fullbacks are good enough attacking wise. Certainly not Mikalenko. Seamus can be, obviously, but again, it's a big ask for Seamus at his age and with his injury record to do that, up and down all the time. We also don't have a solid, consistent third centre back. We don't have a third centre back we can look at and think, I trust you week in, week out to be in there and to be solid. I think the two up front thing is massive. I think whatever the manager decides to do, however the manager decides to change it, and that's on the assumption that he will change it. He mightn't. We might come back and be the exact same, which I think would be stupid. But if he is going to change it, I think the two up front is huge because we're not scoring goals. And it just doesn't make any real sense to me, tactical sense to me, for a team to not be scoring goals and only have one up front when you've got an option of having two up front, and I get Dom and Beto haven't played an awful lot together, and I get they're very different players and very different styles, but it doesn't always have to be Dom and Beto. Like you said, it could be Dom and Chimiti. 1 week it could be Beto and Chimiti. When Danjuma comes back from injury, it could be
Oh, yeah, I
Danjuma
forgot
up
about
there.
Danjuma. Yeah,
Yeah,
he could maybe be a welcome refresher.
yeah, absolutely. But I think the point is we haven't, and I keep saying this because I keep drilling it into people, because I do think there's a sense of there seems to be a sense of acceptance amongst the fan base at the moment, and I think that's what Ped means when he talks about when are we going to start expecting higher. There seems that we seem to lose, and people seem to say, oh well, you can't blame Sean Dyche. What should expect? Well, I expect Everton to be able to go out and win games of footy, and certainly win at least a couple in a 3-month spell. But I think the necessity of having two up front is huge, and like I said, he needs to find a way to make that work, because we're not scoring enough goals, but we don't look threatening enough to me, and I think you look much more threatening if you've got two big centre forwards as opposed to one. And like you said, the changes in defence are necessary. I am sceptical with the five at the back, because I don't trust Ben Godfrey or Michael Keane to sit in there and to be able to just do the basics. Even next to Tarkowski and Brandwaite, I don't trust them. I don't particularly trust our wing backs to be good enough going forward, creating opportunities. But
And they normally don't know the areas that they need to be in, and they're out of position when they're in a back five because no one's comfortable, and we end up conceding. If you look at the past few years when we've played five, I think we've conceded so many goals, to be fair.
we have, but we've also had some huge wins as well, playing
What,
five at the
the
back.
only one?
We beat Brighton five at the back, didn't we? When we beat them
Oh, we
five,
did. We
that
did.
was five at the back. So I think
But we had
the
Iwobi as a bit of
a wing
someone
back,
with
yeah,
some creativity. So
yeah. Again, another player that we've lost and probably could do with now in the squad. But I think the sort of main point is something needs to change, doesn't it? We can't come back after the break with Ben Godfrey right back, the same midfield three, and Jack Harrison, McNeil, and Calvert-Lewin up front, can we? Because it's just, or Beto up front, because it's just not working at the moment. And I do think having two up front is a necessary now, a necessity. Whoever that two is, I think it's a necessity.
Completely forgot about the Cora. You could also be up front with Beto
Yeah,
or
playing off in that sort of Delhi role, like you mentioned, yeah. But there needs to be, for me, two up there. Whether it's straight two up front, whether it's one behind the other slightly, or however you do it, two of them need to be dedicated to being in those areas, to getting on opportunities and scoring goals. And I mentioned that I think the introduction of some fresh young faces, however the manager thinks the manager can turn around and say they're not good enough, they're not ready, etc., etc. But there's no way on this planet you can tell me that Dwight McNeil has been good enough already in recent weeks, or Jack Harrison has been good enough already, because they haven't. They simply haven't. So, bringing somebody on who's fearless and got a point to prove in a young lad who wants to stamp his mark on the Premier League, I think that says a lot more for players that sort of know that they're going to be in there week in, week out, and are fairly comfortable with what they're doing. And, I'm not saying they don't try hard, or they don't work hard, or they don't give it all, but It's not, as we've said, it's not enough. When are we going to start demanding a little bit more? And the manager should look at it, and that should be what the manager thinks as well. The manager should look at it and think, well, all right, you're working hard and you're giving everything, that's fine, but we're not winning, so I need to change this because we're not winning. And I think in a perfect world, if Everton weren't in such a financial mess and Everton weren't hanging over a takeover, I think there'd be a lot more pressure on Sean Dyche. I really do, and
100%.
I think it would force him to make changes. It would force him to do something different. It almost feels at the moment like he's comfortable in what he's doing because he knows, well, I'm not going to be chased out the door. There's no one to chase me out the door. There's no money to do it. But he almost needs that kick up the arse because we're not winning games. I'm not saying sack him or threaten to sack him or whatever, but we need something different because we're simply we're not winning games at the moment. Just briefly, before, have you got a...
I have to go,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay, absolutely
Yeah.
no worries, mate. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, whenever you want
Thanks
to...
for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Whenever
Hopefully,
you want to jump back on, let us know.
hopefully speak to you soon. Enjoy the no Everton 3 weeks.
Definitely, and
Um,
hopefully we can have a 3-week period where we're not stressing and anxious over it. But I doubt it. This is Everton.
Thanks so much, mate.
Cheers,
Enjoy
mate.
the.
Thank you very
Oh, yeah.
much. See you soon. See you in a bit. Okay, so unfortunately, Cornet has had to drop out there. He had to drop out with work. He did let me know beforehand, so I'm not gonna hold that against him. Hope you all enjoyed that little bit. Obviously, if you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know Cornet has been on a couple of times. Always speaks from the heart. Always speaks passionately. Always speaks, with a lot of emotion. So big thanks to Cornet for jumping on and joining us. Just before we go, I just want to wrap up on a couple of things we've mentioned in the pod so far today. Yeah, like I said, for me, it's absolutely imperative that the manager tries something different. It does feel at the moment like we are in a bit of a petty civil war amongst the fan base of his fault, not his fault, your fault, not my fault sort of thing, and it just doesn't work because at the end of the day, as I've just said before to Cornet, we're still going to have this manager at the end of the season and we're still going to have this playing squad at the end of the season. So we need to find a way to make it work, and it isn't working currently. And I don't think that way is to just continue doing what we're doing and hope something changes because, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results. It just doesn't work. So yeah, big 3 weeks for Sean Dyche. Huge 3 weeks for the Everton squad. I know there's no game, and I know obviously there's a lot less pressure because there's no game. But this is a massive 3 weeks for the manager. Arguably the 3 biggest weeks of his Everton career because he's got to come back after this break and he's got to show us something different. And most importantly, he's got to get results. Performances are what they are. I don't mind watching Everton play boring long ball football for 90 minutes, and I obviously love watching Everton play lovely attractive football, but none of it matters if the result isn't the result that you're hoping for, and that is first and foremost the most important thing in the position that Everton are in, is the result. Just before we go, I just want to touch on a couple of things just before we leave. A couple of bits of news. According to the Mirror, Jared Branthwaite is Manchester United's top target this summer. Everton are wanting at least 75 million for the defender, but Man United will try and drive the price down to 50 million. This worries me slightly. Not that I think Everton would sell for £50 million, but I think the huge price tags that maybe we're expecting for Jared Branthwaite's sale at some point in the future, I'm not quite sure they'll be as huge as what we may be expecting or hoping for as a fan base because of the position and the situation Everton are in. Other clubs now are in a very, very strong position when it comes to negotiating with Everton Football Club because they know we need the money and they know we are absolutely desperate for the funds in order to A, balance out FFP, and B, because we're currently undergoing a change of ownership and God knows how much we're going to have to spend when the new owners come in. So, yeah, it does worry me a little bit because for me, Everton should be in a position where we're asking for 150 million pounds for Jared Branthwaite because that's absolutely what he's worth. But it probably isn't going to be that. but 75 is the absolute bare minimum I'd be taking for Jared Brandwaite, even taking into consideration the situation and the position that Everton are in. James Vaughan has been appointed as Everton's head of youth recruitment. Hopefully he can change the story, as we just mentioned before. Sean Dyche coming out and saying things like Everton haven't really got an array of young talent knocking on the door, so hopefully James Vaughan can come in and change that, because as Cornet quite rightly said before, how is it that the other club in our city is able to come up with 5, 6, 7, 8 young players that are more than good enough to step in and play in the Premier League every week, and we can't find one that is even capable of competing in a squad that is absolutely threadbare and hasn't won a game of football in 3 months? That is slightly worrying, so let's hope James Vaughan can change that around. And yeah, that pretty much, I think, rounds us up for today. Obviously, there's no game for a couple of weeks now, but there will still be podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode, and we may even have a bonus episode before that, so look out for that one. We'll be talking much more in depth about what Everton need to do between now and the end of the season in order to survive, really, because that is the situation that we're in again, unfortunately. And yeah, as I said, we'll be delving into a little bit more of the nuts and crannies of Sean Dyche and Everton Football Club, whilst we've got some time to do that, obviously, before the games return. So there you go. Huge thank you all for watching and listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do leave a like. If you want to listen to this episode, by the way, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else, it will be under the name The Park End Podcast. The reason for that is because I had the previous podcast called The Park End Podcast, and it took me an absolute age to set that profile up, and in the time it would take me to do a new one for the Mighty Blues, I may as well just throw them all on there and you can go over and listen. So if you go over to the Park End Podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything else, you'll find it there. If you're watching on YouTube, huge thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you are new to the channel, please do subscribe. It does only take a second. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Big thank you all for watching, and we'll see you after.